discussing the second of the two alternative measures to GDP per capita, which is called the Measure of Australia's Progress, or MAP. Again, use the full term when defining it the first time. So the map is again, it reflects the desire of the ABS to indicate whether life in Australia is actually getting better, rather than just we're experiencing economic growth. So rather than just measuring growth in terms of an increase in production, they separate basically our living standards into 4 different domains. So make sure you get the words right here. They separate a nation's wealth into 4 different domains, and basically they try and use statistics to see whether we're making improvements in each of these 4 domains. And the 4 domains are society, economy, environment, and governance. So it kind of makes sense what's being included in some of them, but society looks at things like whether we're becoming more healthy, and the main way they would do that is based on life expectancy, looking at the level of stress level in society, looking at the level of crime. Then we've got economy, which looks at all these things like national income and productivity. That's again where they're going to calculate consumption spending and GDP and all these kind of things. Environment, so they'll look at the level of biodiversity. So if we're experiencing, a lack of biodiversity and more animals are becoming extinct, or native plants are becoming extinct, then that would be a sign that living standards are getting poorer. It looks at the level of waste. It would also look at the level of carbon emissions within this category. So they would be basically some of the dimensions that we'd be looking at. And the last one is called governance. This one was introduced recently, and it's basically about how much confidence people have in the political process, in their politicians, how much say people think they have. So they're your 4 domains. Okay, so each dimension uses a range of statistical measures to see whether we're making progress in each of those 4 domains. So within each domain, there's lots of different dimensions, and so within the first one, which is society, we'd measure health based on life expectancy. Within environment, we'd be measuring pollution based on air quality. And again, we're trying to get a more overall indication of whether material and non-material living standards are improving within society. So the inclusion of these indicators gives a better indication of overall well-being. Not just are we producing more, are we healthier, have we got a better environment, have we got trust in our leaders, are people less stressed? So you've got your 4 domains, and then within each domain, these really should be bolded, you have lots of different dimensions. So you don't need to know all of them, you need to know what the 4 domains are: society, economy, environment, and governance, and some different things within each one, and how we would measure each of those things to give a good quality answer. So health, life expectancy, close relationships, again that would be looked at sort of the number of breakups, level of divorce rates. Safety and crime, so we'd be looking at crime statistics, level of violence, level of break-ins within countries. Learning and knowledge, so they take statistics to see if we're getting smarter. Within economy, we're looking at things like national wealth, the unemployment rate, all these kind of things. Biodiversity for environment, air pollution, the quality of our oceans, all of these kind of things would be included as dimensions within each domain. So here's basically from your other textbook. This gives you a bit of more of an indication of some of the things that they would use. I suggest you pause it on this slide, or you can have a look through the slides. But you can see health, some of the things they would use: infant mortality, they'd look at the causes of death, they'd look at life expectancy. Education, so we'd be looking at participation rates, the amount of people that have a tertiary qualification. Literacy levels, so literacy in Australia is about 99%, went up to 99.5%, great, we get a tick. The unemployment rate within individuals, labour unutilisation rate, which we'll talk about next chapter, basically the amount of people that would like to be working longer hours. Then within the economy domain, we'd look at national income, which is real GDP per capita, similar to what we used in the past. Household consumption per head, the distribution of average real equivalised disposable household income by quintile, which is a fancy way of saying mapping out how poor and rich different families are, and looking at how much wealth they have, how much income they're generating per household, and how much income our lowest 20% of households are earning. Looking at labour and multi-factor productivity, seeing if that's improving. Ratio of imports to GDP, real unit labour costs. So know a couple of things that would fit within the economy dimension. The environment, so number of threatened species, number of threatened forests, excess ozone levels. Obviously I haven't memorised all of these, and I don't expect you to, but know a couple within each domain. And then family cohesion, proportion of children living with a single parent, level of voluntary work that's going on, suicide rates, including homicide rates. You've got victims of personal and household crime. Imprisonment rate's a good one to quote. Okay, and things like communication, like what percentage of society owns a computer. So again, I suggest you memorise 2 that go within each domain. There you go, that's my suggestion. Do a little table for yourself with 2 for each domain, and know the 4 domains. So basically all they do is, with all of these different things, they give them a tick to see whether we're making progress, or a cross to see if we're going backwards in terms of that domain. If there's a lack of information, then they will get a question mark, and if it's sort of unclear whether we're improving living standards in that domain, we would get like a little squiggly line. So you can see, based on this, health is improving, safety is improving, so there must be less crime, knowledge is improving, but then some things we have insufficient data for. And some things are getting worse, but not many based on this. So sustaining the environment is getting worse. Weaknesses of the map. Living standards cannot be condensed to a single statistical figure. So giving just ticks and crosses across a range of dimensions doesn't really say overall whether our living standards are improving. So looking at that, you can't just say, oh good, Australia's doing better than it did last year, or it's doing worse. Because even if there's more ticks than crosses, it doesn't necessarily mean that means our living standards are improving. That cross might be really, really bad, but we just don't get enough information just based on ticks and crosses. The selection of specific measures is subjective, so what to include and what not to include is subjective, like the GEPI. And a lot of times we don't have enough statistical data. So a lot of these have got question marks next to them, which show a lack of statistical data, which is one weakness of the map. So, to sum up, explain the map and identify why it is a better indication of living standards than GDP per capita. Okay, so you would start off by saying the map reflects the desire of the ABS to indicate whether life in Australia is actually getting better, rather than just looking at economic indicators. Okay, so that's what the aim of it is. It's a more broad measure. Then explain what it does. It measures progress across, now it's 4, it used to be 3, I should have written that, updated it. 4 broad indicators for society, provide some examples, so health, crime, economy, national income, productivity, environment, changes in biodiversity, climate change, level of waste, and then you look at governance and put that in there as well, for looking at whether people have a say, their confidence in political leaders. And basically it determines whether they can progress in each of those. Unlike GDP, the inclusion of social and environmental factors gives a more broad indication of whether society is better off than in the past, and a better indication of both material and non-material living standards. The inclusion of these indicators gives a better indication of overall well-being than GDP alone. So again, just showing what you know what the 4 domains are, and just mentioning some of the dimensions within each domain, and then just summarising the overall aim of the map.